Well, I'm so excited to be able to tell you about this project I've been working on using the speckle instruments on the Gemini telescopes. My name is Jen Winters, as Megan kindly introduced me. I'm a research associate at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. I'm moving on to Williams College starting next week. So I'm really excited to make that transition. And so I first want to just point out my collaborators on this project. This is, I want to give thanks to Elliot Horch and Todd Henry and Donna Cassetti. And then in addition, this has been an ongoing project for the past 4 to 6 years. And so I definitely want to thank the observers at Gemini North and South, as well as the instrument scientists, Ricardo Salinas and Andy Stevens, the support team there, as well as the Steve Howell and Nick Scott and Elise Ferlin, who's reduced a bunch of the data for me. So I'm going to be talking about the very nearest M-dwarfs, but I want to first orient us by talking about the very nearest star to us, the sun. This is the sun and our 8 planets here. If we think about other neighbors of the sun within 10 parsecs, I show them here. The more massive stars are bluer, so these are the 4 A stars within 10 parsecs, out to the K stars here in orange. But I'm interested in M-dwarfs, as you can probably tell from my talk title. And so when you add in all of the M-dwarfs within 10 parsecs, you can see that these low mass stars really dominate the nearby star population. And in fact, they make up 75% of all stars in our galaxy. And so I just want to remind you of some of the physical parameters of M-dwarfs. So here's an M-dwarf, typical M-dwarf star compared to the sun. These have masses roughly 10 to 60% the mass of the sun with similar radii, and they're intrinsically faint, so they have really low luminosities, and thus not one of these types of stars is visible to the naked eye. But since, like I said, since 2018 and even before then through other collaborators' proposals, I've been conducting an all-sky survey using the speckle instruments on the Gemini telescopes to search for stellar companions to the very nearest M-dwarf. So the speckle instruments, the original is the Differential Speckle Survey Instrument, or DISI, and then Zorro and Alapeke are the kind of replicas of this original instrument. And so I've been using these for a number of years to conduct this large survey. And the motivation for my survey, before I get into all the nitty-gritty details, the motivation for conducting a survey like this is encapsulated in this plot that shows multiplicity, stellar multiplicity, as a function of spectral type. And by multiplicity, I mean how frequently a star has a less massive gravitationally bound stellar companion. So this is there's an obvious decreasing trend with primary star mass, meaning that the more massive stars are almost 100% multiple. They almost all have lower mass companions. But then when you get down to the M-dwarfs, you can see that that's roughly 25–30% multiplicity fraction. And we want to understand why this relationship, why we observe this relationship. So is this due to the binary stars' birth environments? Like, we know that M-dwarfs it's been shown recently that M-dwarfs have lower disk masses than more massive stars. But then also in like young nearby star clusters, or those lower mass stars have been shown to have a higher multiplicity rate than field stars. Is that due to some kind of metallicity effect, because younger stars are typically have higher metallicity than older stars, or is there some other kind of birth environment issue? Or is this possibly due to the evolution of binary stars, where low mass stars are just not massive enough to hang on to their companions, and so they lose them over time? So that's part of the motivation for the project I'm going to tell you about. And then in addition, of course, planets. You know, we can only know as much about our planet as we know about our star. These are the very nearest M-dwarfs to us. So I'm surveying M-dwarfs within 25 parsecs. So we need to know everything that we can about these stars because they're highly attractive targets for exoplanet searches. And first of all, we need to know everything about them so that we can properly characterize our exoplanets that we detect around them, which we think that they all have planets, at least one planet. But also we need to know if they have unresolved companions so that we can correct for that. But it also turns out that these M-dwarfs, previous work has shown that these M-dwarfs have these stellar companions at separations less than 2 arcseconds. So this is a stellar multiplicity fraction as a function of distance for M-dwarfs within 25 parsecs that we published a few years ago. And it turned out that most of the stars that were multiple had these separations less than 2 arcseconds. And so we need, Gaia can get us down to about 1 arcsecond resolution, but we need high resolution techniques to push below 1 arcsecond. And it turns out that 2 arcseconds translates to 50 AU for a star at 25 parsecs, which is on scales of our solar system. So I just remind you of the distance scale of the solar system. This is the logarithmic plot. If we put an M-dwarf here where the sun is, it turns out that M-dwarfs have stellar companions at these solar system separations. And using high resolution speckle imaging allows us to find binaries at these separations. So within the orbit of Mercury and out to Uranus's orbit. And so we use, like I said, we're using the high resolution speckle instruments on the Gemini telescopes. DISI was originally on Gemini South, and then it's now moved to the Lowell Discovery Telescope. And actually now I think it's in at APO in the Southwest. But what we do is we take one speckle image, it's 60 milliarcseconds, so like Dave Trilling mentioned earlier. But we take stacks of these images. So we take sequences of 1,000 of these 60 milliarcsecond images, depending on the brightness or the faintness of our M-dwarf target. We can take many sequences of 1,000 60 milliarcsecond images. So then we take the Fourier power spectrum of the sum images from which we can create a reconstructed image, which shows a companion, a stellar companion. And so this technique is amazing. These instruments are amazing. Like Dave Trilling was saying, we can get down to 20 milliarcseconds, and in some cases below the diffraction limit of the telescopes, because we observe simultaneously in 2 filters. There are a number of filters that are available. Generally, it's best to do, you know, kind of a 500 nanometer filter with an 800 nanometer filter, so you get color information for any new companions or any known companions that you detect, so we can differentiate between a white dwarf companion or an M-dwarf companion. And these speckle instruments are capable of roughly 1 milliarcsecond precision per individual measurement. So I show here a plot from a recent paper by Rachel Matson, who was conducting a survey primarily of solar type stars, but this highlights some of the speckle instruments and their capabilities. So we can get down to below 1/10 of an arcsecond and comfortably get delta mags of 3, or even to 5 within within separations of 0.2. And so I want to talk about explain to you our sample. So we're surveying 1,200 M-dwarfs. These all have distances less than 25 parsecs. It's an all-sky sample. As you can see, this is an ATOF projection plot that shows the projected positions of all of our stars on the sky, and they have a wide range of V magnitudes. So Ricardo Salinas can tell you about the pain of trying to observe these really, really faint M-dwarfs, but some of them, he did it, so grateful. And then if you look at the masses of all of these stars, I want to emphasize that these are all the different flavors of M-dwarfs. So there are early M-dwarfs and mid M-dwarfs and late M-dwarfs. There's these where M dwarfs become fully convective below masses about 0.35, 0.3, depends who you talk to. But we have a representative sample of both early M dwarfs and mid to late M dwarfs, as well as these really, really low mass objects down here. And so to date, we've observed about 3/4 of our sample. We've observed 955 stars, and we've used 4 different kind of facilities, but this is primarily a Gemini project. We use the Lowell Discovery Telescope and WIN to try to mitigate using all of our Gemini North time. So we observed the northern closest M dwarfs with those smaller telescopes, and then Gemini North for the rest of the northern targets, and then Gemini South has been amazing. We've detected 80 new binaries so far, and that's all these little black boxes. Excuse me. And so we're super excited. This is just amazing. So here's some of the actual measurements of our companions, and this includes known binaries as well. But I just show that although there's a lot of equal mass or equal magnitude or equal mass companions, but we get down to 4th delta mags of 4 very comfortably. And also, I just want to point out the Gaia lower resolution limit, which is purported to be 0.12 arc seconds, but I bounced all of these against the Gaia DR3, and only 6 of these are actually resolved in the 3rd data release from Gaia. Of course, you know, in the future, I expect more of these to be resolved. Some of these are not. Some of these systems aren't even detected in Gaia. I suspect they haven't just cross-matched the points with the positions, but we have ground-based parallaxes to supplement what Gaia is currently missing. I expect that all to be resolved in the future, but Gaia is not so good with binaries either, subarc second binaries. And so we can use these new measurements to update what we knew from a number of years ago. So roughly, we began this project in 2016. And if we compare what we knew about this population of nearby M dwarfs then and their binary separations, I show here the log of the projected separations of, excuse me, all of these binary pairs. And for the 25 parsec M dwarfs, we estimated the peak at about 20 AU. But if we compare that to what we know of the M dwarfs within 10 parsecs, which we assume are thoroughly surveyed at all separation regimes, they've just been observed to death. So spectroscopic surveys, AO surveys, direct imaging, speckle, lucky imaging, like everybody's looked at these stars. And the peak of those few binaries within 10 parsecs is at 4 AU. And so we generally expect this peak to be, for all of these 25 parsec M dwarfs, to be around 4 AU. And then for comparison, I just show where the peak is from Deepak Raghavan's 2010 FGK binary survey, where he found a peak at roughly 51 AU. So not only, so that's where we stood a number of years ago. But with the addition of all of these new 80 detections, in addition to some new spectroscopic orbits that have been published since 2019, this peak has shifted by a half. So it shifted to 9 AU, which is just incredible. In blue are all the new detections. And so not only are M dwarfs have companions less frequently, but their companions are at much smaller separations than solar type stars. Just confirmation of that important. And probably they're gonna, probably that peak is closer to 4 AU. So in the future, we want to get a second observation of roughly half of our new detections. We've only gotten a second observation for half of them. We want to confirm them. And we want to finish the rest of our survey. We want to get the last 300 stars, and then we can easily vet these newly detected companions to see if they are actually gravitationally bound. So these are all the nearest stars, all nearby stars. So most of them have high proper motion. And so we can compare, say, where the Gaia data point is compared to archival images taken 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and see if our science star has moved on top of a background star. And so therefore we can determine which of these are actually gravitationally bound companions. So I just want to highlight as well a complementary survey that I'm finishing up. So I'm finishing up this multi-epoch high-resolution spectroscopic survey of the nearest mid to late M dwarfs within 15 parsecs. So this is about 400 of the same 400 stars in the same sample. Excuse me. And then we're also observing using tests to look for planets and to perform stellar astrophysics studies on these same 400 stars, measuring rotation periods and flare demographics. So this is just a really rich sample. And then there is still other complementary science that can be done, and especially with Gaia. So while I say that only 6 of them are resolved in Gaia, that's not the end of the story. That's not the end of Gaia's usefulness. So if I went through and I searched for all of these new detections in the DR3, and it turns out that many, like 50 of these, have this RUWE parameter that is significant. So this parameter indicates how much excess astrometric noise there is from a single star solution in the Gaia astrometric solution. And so hopefully, so there roughly 50 of these have a significant non-single star excess astrometric noise. So hopefully we can get perturbations from Gaia. And so we can get the magnitude of the perturbation. Using our Gemini speckle data, we can get definitely the relative flux, because we get delta mags for every single companion, from which we can deblend the photometry and get individual masses for each star. And then if the orbits are a reasonable, few years, we can get a number of, we can map out the orbit with speckle. And then we can get masses for each of these stars, with which we can constrain the mass luminosity relation, and also determine the mass ratio distribution of these types of stars, and then split into different subsets based on primary star mass. So in conclusion, I've been conducting this all-sky survey of many nearby M dwarfs, looking for really close companions. And we've observed roughly 3/4 of our sample, 955 M dwarfs, and detected 80 new companions. And we learned that most of these M dwarfs have companions at these small separations, which is at 25 parsecs, 10 AU is 0.4 arc seconds. So we really need high resolution techniques for these to detect these companions. And then finally, this work is important for characterizing our planet discoveries. So not only is it important to know if your science star is a binary, like a really truly gravitationally bound binary, that's important for subtracting off excess light and subtracting off excess like rate of velocity trends. But also if these are just background stars, we need to know about those as well, so that we can still correct for any excess light. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, do we have any questions? Yeah, all the way in the back, if you want to come up to the mic.
Thank you for your great talk. I have a quick question. What is your expectation for like the maximum or peak of the the binary fraction in AU?
What's my expectation of where the peak should be?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it should be closer to, I mean, probably like closer to like 5 or 6 AU, because it's possible that there's widely separated binaries that are under kind of represented within 10 parsec sample. So I think it's closer to 5 AU.
Oh, I have another question. And like for your target, that's like 1,000 numbers, right? I mean, you observed like about 1,000 M-Dwarfs.
Yep.
And how many like moving group members are included in your like target?
Yeah, there are some. So the way the sample was initially defined along in 2014 even was it was all the M-Dwarfs that had parallaxes. And this is before Gaia. Of course, we've updated the parallaxes to be more precise with the Gaia parallaxes. But so there are, maybe that's irrelevant information, but yeah, there are some young stars that are like AP Call is in there. There are definitely some young stars. If they had a parallax before Gaia and they were within 25 parsecs, then and they're an M-Dwarf, they're in this sample.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer. I have a question. So for how many of your detections are you getting a color, some detection in the blue channel? And can you comment on how important it would be to get colors?
Right. So technically, we it's interesting that you asked. So I purposely showed this plot only for stars that we detected in the 800 nanometer channel, because for some of these they're not detected in the blue channel. Not so many, maybe 10 of them don't have a detection in the blue channel, but for 70, or this is 150 stars because it includes all of our measurements. So for like 100 or 110 of these, we have a color, like a V minus I color. And so we haven't detected any kind of white dwarf yet, as far as I can tell. Maybe one, but they're all M-Dwarfs.
Hi, great talk. This is Janice. Just a very basic question. So what is the impact of the binary fraction separation in terms of the peak that's changing on planet formation scenarios?
Right. Well, I mean, so Matt Holman, who's at the CFA, he has so technically, or what's been shown is that as long as your planets are within a third of the distance between, of the binary star separation, they should be stable. I guess then, for M-Dwarfs, it's really turning out that they all have more than one. So what happens, in those cases, as long as maybe they're both within a third of the separation, a third of the distance between the other, the binary separation, they should be stable enough. Is that what you're asking?
I think that's an answer to a question. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, M-Dwarfs tend to have all the M-Dwarf planets that we're finding, or many, at least the transiting ones, they're all at really short periods, and really, really tiny separations. Like of course, the one I think of is LTT 1445, which is this M-Dwarf triple at 7 parsecs, and the two planets are orbiting the A component, which is separated by 50 AU from the BC component. That it's a hierarchical system, but these planets have like 0.02 and 0.04 AU distances from the primary star, so they're stable. So this 10 AU thing is irrelevant in terms of this system, but I guess it would matter for like closer binaries. I mean, that's a question of how stable that system would be. And if anybody is brave enough to look for planets in spectroscopic binary systems.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, do we have Slack questions?
There's none on Slack, but I do have a question. Great talk, Jen. You mentioned metallicity, and I was wondering whether you've looked at it a lot with the different binary detections and whether you'd seen any trends.
So, I mean, metallicity is tricky, right? So you need to they're not very there've been a lot of surveys, but hardly anybody's done a decent sample that is consistent, right? So so that's definitely on my list of things to do, because I want to know if there's a trend of of changing multiplicity with metallicity, but it's hard to measure that. I guess SDSS is perhaps doing that, so that would be possibly, but no, I haven't looked into this, but it's definitely something that I'm interested in, and I would like somebody to do it because I really want to know. But my current what I'm currently looking at is galactic space motions to see if, as a proxy for age, to see if these binaries are getting stripped at larger galactic space motions compared to smaller galactic space motions. But this sample is too small to really definitively tell. So I need 1,000 rate of velocities.
All
Thank
right,
you.
let's quickly thank all the speakers in this session one more time.